5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start with you, Mr. Hunter. You made some statements today talking about the causation of this crisis that we see at our southern border. You cited poverty, corruption, climate change, to name a few. Is that correct? I want to run by some actual quotes from President Biden for you real quick. On September 12th, 2019, then candidate Biden said, "We're a nation who says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come." Did you hear that? Did you hear him say that, sir? Yes or no?
I didn't specifically hear that quote.
Okay, thank you. On June 27th, 2019, candidate Biden, "Those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe." Did you hear him say that?
I don't specifically recall that quote, sir.
Okay. Would you agree with those statements, though, that we should absorb them? That we should have the capacity to absorb them? We should do that?
Congressman, we're required under law to inspect individuals who present, and individuals do have the right to seek asylum in the United States.
So would you add that to your list now that we've gone over that it wasn't just it's not poverty, corruption, climate change, a tsunami, like my friend here, Mr. Burkeen, was talking about? Do you think that one of two people that could have been the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, saying that to the entire country and to the entire world during a television hearing, do you think that had anything to do with what we're seeing now at the southern border?
Congressman, it sounds like it is a recognition that there are people who are fleeing persecution, and in my reference to the particular governments, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, there are individuals who are fleeing persecution under those regimes.
Okay, so one of the leaders of the free world said, "Hey, if you want to come here, you should come," right? So, all right, that's really what's going on here. That's what my friend, Mr. Burkeen, was talking about. That's what many people are talking about up here. This isn't the, global climate, movement that many of my colleagues on the other side are trying to make it out to be. A lot of what it is globalism, sir. There are a lot of people around the world that are very, very powerful, and they don't want anybody to have borders. They want globalism. World Economic Forum is one of them, and that's unfortunately, what many of our leaders actually take their cue from. What do you guys have to say to Americans who are living in fear every day of another terrorist attack? Let's start with you, Ms. Sabatino.
No, thank you for the question. We invest significant resources, starting with our National Targeting Center, which also plays a significant role in the screening and vetting of individuals, whether they're through these processes or any individuals arriving to the U.S.
What do you guys have to say to Americans who have seen their schools, hospitals, and community spaces overtaken by migrants? You guys have any? You get a chance. You're on TV right now. Do you guys have anything to say to them? Do you have anything to say to Americans who are afraid the cartels are taking over their towns? How about anything to say to Americans who have lost their children to fentanyl? Do you guys have anything to say to them? Go ahead, Mr. Hunter.
Congressman, in regards to the irregular migration challenges, it is a singular focus of our department to reduce irregular migration in the hemisphere and unlawful entry out.
Okay, well, thank you for that, but you're doing a horrible job, and the American people know it, okay? I mean, you guys are doing the worst job in the history of this country. So the fact that you even answered that as if that's your responsibility just shows me tells me how detached from reality you absolutely are. Mr. Hunter, where were you on 9/11, sir? Do you remember where you were?
I do indeed, Congressman. I was working in Washington, D.C. At an NGO on DuPont Circle at the time.
What about you, Ms. Sabatino? Where were you?
I was an immigration inspector at John F. Kennedy International Airport.
You remember exactly where you were that day?
I do.
Ma'am, what about you? You remember?
Yeah, I worked for the Executive Office for U.S. Attorney's Department of Justice.
Miss Youth?
I was serving in Madrid at the time, but I was in Geneva at a training.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask you guys that, do you remember what Americans were saying right after that? Do you remember what Americans were saying? Do you remember saying never again? We're never going to let this happen again? You guys remember that? Yes or no? Go ahead, Miss Youth. Do you remember Americans saying that?
Yes, sir.
Miss Meckley?
Yes, sir.
Miss Sabatino?
Yes.
Well, guess what, guys? It's going to happen again. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And for every one of you guys that has sat by and supported these policies and these tools that we're talking about today that have allowed and expedited this mass migration into the United States, you're going to share a little bit of that ownership, all right? That changed so many of our lives forever. We said never again, and here we are implementing policies and tools that are making it so easy for individuals who don't love this country, who want to do harm to this country. And we're not talking about everybody. We know there are plenty of people who just want to come here for a better life. But you guys all know there are plenty of people in this country right now that want to do Americans harm. And this is my question for you, and we don't have time to answer it, but I want you to think about this. When the next major attack, like 9/11 or a series of 9/11s happen in this country, will you still continue to support these policies and these tools? Because we're not going to forget it. We're not going to forget who was at the helm. We're not going to forget who was in these positions. We're not going to forget the policies. We're not going to forget the tools. And we're not going to forget the committee hearings like we had today, where you guys could have condoned this administration, and you guys didn't. All right? Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentlewoman, Ms. Greene, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Crane, for pointing out the most important things that people outside of this city talk about. While you all are paid with a taxpayer-funded paycheck, I want you to know that most Americans are concerned exactly about what Mr. Crane talked about. There's also many Americans, like in my home state of Georgia, that are still grieving the death of a young woman named Laken Riley, who was brutally murdered by an illegal alien that came into this country in Venezuela, who had injured a child in New York, was not deported. In my district, fentanyl is a real problem. It's a serious problem. Fentanyl doesn't discriminate based on politics or identity, sexual orientation, or race. Fentanyl is killing people every single day. And it's also something that's extremely concerning for everyone in my district. This is such an outrage to most Americans. And again, they pay all of our paychecks with their hard-earned tax dollars, that our country is under invasion. It is an invasion. Now, while we believe that people should legally immigrate to America and follow the laws, all of our laws are being completely broken. And the fact that over 10 million people have come in our country and there's 2 million gotaways on your watch, 2 million gotaways that are capable of doing something like Mr. Crane just talked about, a terrorist attack, or the daily crime committed against innocent Americans, whether it's a tragic car accident that kills Americans in the car, whether it is a fentanyl poisoning, a murder the fentanyl comes from China to Mexico and comes into our country, or whether it's a brutal murder like what happened to Laken Riley. It's happening every single day. The CBP One app is the most fascinating thing to me. While Congress just banned TikTok, we have this app that our government funds that it's shocking statistics. More than 459,000 individuals have scheduled Southwest border appointments with the CBP One app since January 2023, and 96% of those scheduled appointments with the app were issued a notice to appear and paroled into the country. 96%. The CBP One app is like a welcoming app. Welcome to America. Come on in. You aren't vetting people. We've heard from witnesses before our committee. We heard from one mother whose daughter was horrifically raped and murdered, and the man that raped and murdered her daughter had gang tattoos and cartel tattoos all over him. And he was allowed in the country. And he brutally raped and murdered her daughter, and her daughter's boyfriend still has the voicemail on his phone of her last 2 minutes of life while she was calling him in panic. And that voicemail is her being raped and murdered. This is what our country is dealing with. And it seems to fall on deaf ears when we talk to witnesses like you. It's unbelievable. Ms. Sabatino, according to DHS, applicants for the CHNV program, quote, undergo a clear and robust security vetting, end quote. a clear and robust security vetting. In order to obtain advanced travel authorization through CHNV parole program, an individual provides biometric information, including a photograph, using the CBP One app. Now, on our committee, well, they're all gone, there are Democrats that signed a letter, literally signed a letter, saying that it's unfair, completely unfair, that transgender migrants have to provide a photo. That's unfair to them. And they would like to take away the photo requirement on the CBP One app. Are all individuals in the CHNV parole process required to submit biographical information through CBP One?
Biographic and biometric, it's the photo.
Can you imagine not having a photo?
The facial biometric matching is a significant security enhancement to the CBP One app.
Are you keeping criminals out of our country with the CBP One app?
The CBP One app really is just the tool to move the information, but we are taking the biographic and biometric information and matching it against watch lists, our law enforcement's databases, travel data, criminal records, as well as our derogatory photo index.
So do you sleep good at night? Like, do you know for a fact that you're keeping these criminals out of our country with the CBP One app? You're confident that you're keeping out rapists, murderers, cartel members, you're terrorists? You're confident that you're keeping them out of our country?
Congresswoman, as a 26-year career employee, I'm very well aware of the challenges that we are up against, and I sleep well knowing that our CBP officers and frontline personnel are doing their level best to protect the American communities.
So CBP One app processes the information and expedites people from over 160 countries around the world into our country, and you sleep good at night and you're confident in the CBP One app.
The CBP One app doesn't expedite individuals. It actually affords advanced information to our officers to do that robust vetting and screening, and the facial, obtaining the photos to do the facial biometric match to our DROG index.
So you don't think already having the information in an app with the photo, when the migrants can come and select a date and time to come meet with Border Patrol, that doesn't expedite the process? You're saying that's not an expedition of the process?
I think I can highlight a number of instances over the last 10 years where migrants showing up at our ports of entry without any advanced information quickly overwhelm our teams and then redirect our teams from doing things like interdicting fentanyl or outbound operations, seizing weapons and currency that funds the cartels. We have a lot of different disciplines and responsibilities at the ports of entry. Without that streamlined modern process, we would be solely focused on processing individuals who were required to afford the opportunity to request asylum at our ports of entry.
Sure, so maybe thousands of people showing up at one time at a port of entry or at the border along the way it would be considered an invasion. That's what most Americans are calling it. And most Americans are against the fact that their taxpayer dollars are having to pay for a handy-dandy app that people can download and enter the information so they can be expedited into America. It's outrageous. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go ahead and yield. Thank you.